Hey there, this is Max from UMax. This is our comprehensive guide on the Einscan Pro 2X. Today we're going to be going over unboxing, setup, calibration, rapid and HD scan modes, post-processing, as well as finalizing your scans into meshes. If you're looking for our video on how to use the fixed scan mode, check out the part 2 of this video, where we will focus exclusively on that. Your 2X will come with the following: calibration board, power adapter and cable, quick start guide and certificate, USB drive, calibration board stand, scanner, a set of markers, phone mount adapter, and a cable holder. To set up, plug the power cable into the power outlet and then into the power brick. Then plug the other end of the power cable into the port on the data cable. You should be able to see the lights in the scanner lighting up. Then we will plug the data cable into the PC. Next, plug the USB drive into your PC. The USB drive will contain the software that we need to install. Optionally, if you can, I would recommend installing the newest version of the software, which we will link in the description down below. If you do this, you do not need to use the USB. If you are using the USB, open the drive and launch this program. Install it as shown. The installation that you get from the website will be a similar installation process. Once you launch the software, you will need to verify your license. On the old version of the software found on the USB, this is done by clicking this button right here. This will show up when you launch the software. On newer versions of the software, you will have to log into your account. If you do not have one, then you'll have to register. Once you do so and log in, it should automatically verify your license. Next, we'll do calibration. In order to initialize calibration, go ahead and click this button right here. Go ahead and grab the calibration board and the stand. Lay the calibration board flat in the orientation shown on screen and hold the scanner over it, aiming at the middle of the board, oriented with the board, like so. Click the play button on the scanner to start the calibration step. Raise and lower the scanner until all the distance bars on screen are lit up green. Make sure the target being projected onto the board from the scanner is in the middle as you are doing this. The next 3 steps of calibration are the same, except you will be putting the scanner in the calibration stand and rotating it as needed. The instructions on the screen show you the positions you will be rotating it to, but I will also show you the full process right here. When you install your color pack, make sure that the scanner is off and there's no power going to it. Also, make sure to do a new calibration. If you're using a color pack, you will also need to do a white balance calibration. This is very easy. All you need to do is click this button here, flip the board over to the plain white side, and do a similar motion that you did in step 1 of the scanner. If you have any trouble with this, make sure to reference the instructions on screen. First, we're going to go over rapid scan mode. Rapid scan mode is great for large/medium objects that don't require a lot of detail or high resolution. It's quicker and easier than HD scan with a larger field of view. When we make a new project, you will see many options. First is texture. We can only enable texture scanning if you have a color pack attached to your scanner. Next is tracking. Tracking is how our scanner will be able to tell where the scanner is relative to our subject. If you have texture scanning enabled, you can use texture for tracking. Otherwise, you can use feature tracking, marker tracking, or hyper tracking. Feature tracking uses the physical geometric features of an object to track. This only works if your object has rich, non-symmetrical features without large, flat areas. Marker tracking uses these stickers, sometimes called targets, as a point of reference. If you use marker tracking, you will have to put a good amount of these on your subject. Hybrid tracking uses both feature and marker tracking. It's great for when some parts of the object can be done with feature tracking, but other parts need help from markers. Hybrid tracking is what I recommend for most objects. Operation modes other than classic offer some increased performance at the cost of processing time. Lightning plus Refine allows the user to change the resolution after scanning, but also at the cost of processing time. Resolution is an important setting that will determine how much detail you can capture. This will affect file size and processing time. Exact measurements in millimeters can be found to the slider on the right, which can also be used to fine-tune the level of resolution that you need. Keep in mind that sliding the slider all the way to the top past what the high setting would put it to might result in very high processing times and VRAM usage, so be mindful of that. Before we scan, let's do some general overview of the user interface. Here is our camera window showing us what our scanner sees, a few settings such as brightness on those cameras as well as flat detection, which will warn us if we're scanning any flat areas on our object that won't be able to pick up correctly. It's generally a good idea to keep this one on. The project window will let us manage multiple scans. Using that, you can start a new project if you wish to make a separate scan on the same file. You can even align them together if you wish using this button right here. More on multi-project scans and alignment in the next part of this video. On the bottom, there are many tools for selection. We will use these later. On the right, you will see a play button. This play button starts scanning, but we will usually use the button on the scanner for that. The square button generates point clouds, a process that turns our raw scan data into more refined data, but not yet into a mesh, so we can continue scanning. Here are some buttons to save and open projects. And finally, the mesh button, which, if we have generated point clouds, we can use to turn our data into a 3D mesh. Okay, let's go ahead and start scanning. Go ahead and aim your scanner at your subject. If you're using marker tracking, make sure your scanner can see at least 5 of those markers at all times. If you press the play button on your scanner, you will go into preview mode. Here, you will see a preview of what the camera sees and the data you are about to capture. Let's take this opportunity to adjust the brightness. You can do this while scanning by double tapping the play button. This switches the functionality of the plus and minus button from zooming in and out to brightness adjustment. Adjust it so the camera window only shows a little redness on the object, and any markers that you're using are also lit up red. Once everything looks good, press play again, and we will start scanning for real. It should be noted that this subject has 2 different sizes of markers on it. The Pro 2X will only recognize the 3mm markers. Those are the smaller ones. Make sure you go slow around new angles and areas, and keep your distance somewhere in the middle of the distance indicator shown on the left. There's also an indicator on the scanner showing the color corresponding to the distance. Make sure that if your subject is very reflective or pitch black in color, you might want to coat it with a scanning spray or similar product such as dry hair shampoo. The objective with that would be to make the object a matte white color without permanently changing its color. You can order some dedicated scanning spray in the description down below. As you can see, the rapid scan makes quick work of this object, but in order to get to the other side, we have to maintain tracking while crossing a thin edge of sheet metal. This is unfortunately impossible without help of some kind, as the thin edge gives us nothing to track onto. Our trick is to prop the subject up and use another object that we can focus on as we're making the transition to the other side. You can press the scanner's play button to pause the scan whenever you want to reposition the object. Just remember that when you resume, you have to start from a position the scanner has data from. Once we have a portion of the other side, we can lay it down flat and delete the helper object from our data. To edit the data, hold Shift and drag your mouse. Whatever lasso tool you have selected will be used. Then we can use the tools down here to edit the data. This includes deleting the data, inverting the selection, unselecting, and a special one called Connected Domain. Connected Domain will select the data that is touching your already selected data, making it very useful for selecting an entire object without having to manually lasso it without selecting any garbage data. There is also an undo button in case you make a mistake. Now we finalize our edit by clicking the check mark or the play button. We'll finish up the other side of our subject. And now that we got everything we needed, I'm going to generate point clouds. At this point, we could continue scanning, but I think I'm done. Alright, that looks good too. Now I'm going to mesh the object. When we mesh, we will have many options to choose from. Some are self-explanatory. Watertight will automatically fill any holes or missing areas to make a solid object. I would only recommend this for objects that are already close to being watertight. Filter will get rid of garbage data if you still have some left, as does remove small floating parts. Max triangles will affect how complex our mesh is, and therefore its file size and processing time. Most of the time, recommended parameters will be the ideal option, but feel free to experiment with these options, as it's not permanent until you click Confirm. Now that we are done, we have some post-processing options. We can simplify our object to reduce the file size, optimize the mesh, fill holes, as well as some other options we've seen before. Here, I'm going to manually fill some holes. We just have to click on the border of the hole, and it's patched. How it does so is determined by this option here. I would recommend playing around with it depending on your object. Curvature is generally a solid option. Again, none of this is permanent until you confirm your changes. I think I want to save now. We can save in many different formats or export directly to your software of choice. Another thing we can do is take measurements right here in the scanning software. Now let's start a new project in HD mode. Our subject will be different, something that will require much more detail. The process is pretty much the same, except now we'll have to take our time, be much slower, pay attention to our screen as we're scanning. Our field of view is much smaller, so make sure your distance is right and your movement is slower and steadier. This time, we're also scanning in color. One tip that is very important is getting the subject from many different angles. This is best done by repositioning the object many times. If you don't do this, you will likely discover missing data in some parts of the object. If you are scanning in color, you can press this button to turn on and off your texture. If your texture turns out misshapen, after meshing your data, you may need to remap your textures. That's done by pressing this button here. There is also additional texture options on this dropdown when post-processing. Alright, that's about all I have to show you this time. Stay tuned for part 2, where we will focus on the fixed scan mode.